Alright my friends, welcome back to Frogboy X1 Gaming. I'm Andrew and today we're going to be talking about frame generation. Now I only have an AMD GPU, 7900 XTX, 7800X3D PC right now, and the Asus ROG Ally that I could actually test any of this kind of stuff on. Now today I will have a little bit of video up kind of just showing you like results from some of the other games that I've tested, but this is going to be more of a hey man, let's talk about this feature, let's get this out there, and give you my overall feeling about what frame generation is going to do for PC gaming, and even as it starts coming to console, what it's actually going to do, and if I believe that it is a worthwhile feature. Now, I'm not a PC tech expert, period. Like I'm not. I am a casual consumer just like anybody else in the market. I never built this channel to be a freaking PC tech hub or whatever, but obviously this gets brought up a lot, and as a lot of you might know, we all get excited about this new tech as it starts coming out, but then we also have the other people on the other side that push back against this type of stuff because it's not traditional rendering, it's not traditional experience, it's not traditional performance, and it really does start to muddy the waters of what we can actually expect from the hardware that we are buying. Now, as you know, January 6th came along, Nvidia came out, they showcased the 50 series Blackwell GPUs for PC enthusiasts, and a lot of the marketing slides that they showed us do in fact 100% use what Nvidia is now calling multi-frame rate generation technology to push your frame rate higher. That got me thinking. And a lot of people in the comment section talking about lossless scaling a lot. That got me thinking, all right, my AMD 7900 XTX has FSR 3.1 with frame generation in a multiple amount of games. It also allows me to enable AMD's Fluid Motion Frames 2, which is a software hardware driver, which is a driver level feature that can be enabled on all DX11, DX12, OpenGL, and Vulkan games. So you can essentially turn this on any game at a driver level and utilize the frame generation that comes from that. Now, it is better if you use fluid motion frames or something like that. Any of these frame generation technologies, if you lock your frame rate to like 60, 70, 80, 90, wherever you can get a stable frame rate. And in order to do that, you need to get into your game and you need to play for a while. You need to see where your frame rate will 100% stick the most. Like so say you load into a game, you got all your settings turned on, you're running around, you're getting 98 frames, you know, you're going from, well, say you're going from like 75 frames up to 90 frames or whatever. You're going to want to lock that right around wherever, like you're going to want to lock that around like 75. You're not going to want to lock that at 90 frames or 85 or anything like that. You want to lock it where it is always stable. So I would say 70. To be completely honest with you, if that's your frame rate, if you're at 75 and you never go below 70 or you never go below 75, but you can go all the way up to 90, you're going to want to lock it about 5. You're going to want to lock it at an even number, about 5 frames under that, so that you can guarantee that experience is going to stay stable. Stability is super important for frame generation. Very important, because if you don't have a stable frame rate and it's just all over the place, that means your swings are going to vary so wildly. If say you're doing the multi-frame generation game, you've got your 70 frames always guaranteed, or we'll use 60 because that's a lot easier to like, you know, you double that to 120 up to 240, whatever. Okay, so we'll just use 60 as the example. Now, if you have 60 frames consistently, that means you're always going to be at 120 or 240. If you're doubling or tripling or whatever you're going to do, you're always getting an even number, which is always going to divide very well, and it's always going to look smoother. If you have an unlocked frame rate and it's going from 60 up to 90, say that adds an extra 40 frames, and if they're wild swings, okay? Like say you're like 60, sometimes it jumps to 2, it jumps to 90, back down, in between, all that. That means your frame rate is going to be like all over the place. And if you're timesing that by 4, that is an extra, what is that, 40? So for 30, 60, 90, 120. So that can add potentially, if it's at its top at 90, that could add an extra 120 frames just to that experience. And when you get that big of drops while you're playing your games, you're gonna notice that. Like when you're turning your camera, all of this kind of stuff, you're gonna notice these inconsistencies. So it is always better to lock the frame rate so that you're getting the best experience possible at any given time. Now, I'm not gonna say it's perfect, okay, because it's not. If you're going from 60, you're doubling your frame, especially with AMD's fluid motion frames only. If you're only using fluid motion frames, you're gonna get what's called like this little warbling effect in the back. If you're in an open world game or something like that, where you're consistently always turning the camera, you are going to notice the little shift, like as you move your camera, you're gonna notice like a warbling effect. Like it's gonna look like things are kind of shaking. And that's usually found a lot during the 30 frames per second. Or if you are not capping your frame rate, you are going to notice that because your frame rate's all over the place. So you're going to notice that. It does get significantly better when you're utilizing just, you know, FSR's 30 frame generation that is actually tied to the game engine. You're definitely going to get a better effect out of that. That's going to allow you to push your frame rate higher, and then you can turn on AMD's fluid motion frames on top of that, so you can get a significantly higher frame rate. These technologies are made for, say you've got a high refresh rate monitor. Most of the high refresh rate monitors that are coming out these days are using something that's called display streaming compression. Now, when you've already got compression going through there, you're not actually getting a full-on 240 hertz. Your signal is already being compressed. So in my experience on the monitor, I'm getting a pretty stable experience. You're not losing a whole lot of visual cost or anything like that, but it does kind of affect the way it works, because when I use frame generation on the TV, it is a completely different experience. So just the screen technology that you have available to you could potentially make or break your experience when it comes to frame generation. You're going to want a high refresh rate monitor. A high refresh rate monitor is going to be able to handle that signal better. It's going to be able to give you a much smoother experience, because that is in fact what they are built for. Your TV is only going to give you, you know, I mean, this TV has FreeSync Premium Pro, it has G-Sync, and it also has VRR support, so you would think that the experience would be kind of close to what you're getting with a PC, but it's not. It is different. It does feel a little bit more janky on the 120 FPS TV. I do personally, after the testing that I've been doing for the last couple of weeks, feel that frame generation is significantly better on a high refresh rate monitor, because now you're actually getting the real benefit. 120 frames from 60 frames. Yeah, you can tell a difference. Not a massive difference though. It just feels better. Visual quality still looks pretty close. But going from that to 240 frames, that is where it really starts to take off, because now your image quality is just ultra smooth and your controls feel so buttery that it's incredible. But I need to stress the fact that the frame generation, my friends, is only useful mostly while using a controller. If you're using a mouse and keyboard, you are going to notice a lot more inconsistencies than you're going to notice with a controller. Now, that's where Nvidia's multi-frame generation comes in, while it's utilizing AI as an upscale driver for this. Now, that there could make or break how the algorithm is going to work. And obviously, no matter what you're doing, frame generation is always going to inject more latency into what you're doing. And that's why I say, with a controller, you can mask a lot of that. Like, you can completely get rid of so much of that. Technically, all you really need on a controller is like 60 frames a second. You know, if your base frame rate is like 60, it's gonna feel pretty decent, because a controller, in my experience, in my opinion, it just doesn't scale as fast as a mouse does. Now, your mouse is super fast, and you're like kind of, you know, fighting against the resistance of the joysticks. So you're not feeling it's not feeling like, I mean, it's more like a tension-based thing when you're using a controller to like move your camera and stuff like that. Like it just kind of feels better. It's a lot smoother feeling. You can just kind of crank it a little bit or move it fast and you can get that rapid movement or whatever. But with a mouse, it's a lot more freaking, in my opinion, it's a lot faster. It's a lot more precise, and you can get like, you know, a better precision out of a mouse. That's why, you know, that's why a lot of people probably prefer shooter games on a mouse. It's just way more precise. But to me, playing on a mouse and keyboard just never really felt like playing a video game. It just feels like, I don't know, I like the controller. To me, that's what gaming is, playing a video game with a cool controller. So yeah, so guys, let's talk about this, because I've done a lot of testing. I've played a lot of games, and now that I've kind of explained what frame generation is, what it does, you know, how it kind of works a little bit, you know, let's talk about my experience with the frame generation enabled. Now, I've played a lot of these games that feature FSR 3.1, and that gives you the ability to turn on frame generation. I think today's games, I was playing around with the Final Fantasy 16. I was playing around with, you know, some of the other games that have the ability to turn on the frame generation. Then you can turn on AMD's fluid motion frames on top of that. Now, here's the thing that like really starts to like flesh this new feature out and make it so that it is an actual useful feature that will definitely benefit you. Now, I do not know, and I'm not claiming to know how this is going to work on lower end cards. I'm utilizing a 7900 XTX, and 90% of the time, my settings are set to max, like ultra. So obviously, my GPU is working very hard to be able to do all of this. Now, over the coming days and stuff, I'm going to be starting to test this on lower settings. Trying to use more of a, you know, trying to find a way to get it to balance so that I'm getting a balanced performance versus balanced feel of the game at the same time with a decent image quality for what this has to offer. Because I kind of feel like some games introduce more of a, they introduce more latency, or it's harder to run them when you're utilizing higher overall settings. I've noticed that a little bit when I was in Final Fantasy 16 today. I just didn't record any footage, and so I was adjusting some of that stuff, and the more I would adjust, the better the overall feel of the game would get and stuff. And I was like, interesting. So I'm definitely taking that into consideration for my continued testing. But right now, most of the stuff I tested was on, you know, max settings, going back into games like Assassin's Creed Mirage, obviously like Assassin's Creed. So here's the thing: if you already have, like, say, you know, Xbox One generation games or PlayStation 4 generation games that you can hit like 80, 90, 120 frames consistently, those games are absolutely going to feel incredible on a high refresh rate monitor. You're going to be able to push that and get quality image with really high frame rate, and that just absolutely felt incredible. The higher the frame rate you get, the better the game feels as you're playing on a controller, and it's very convincing, my friends, very convincing. The fact that you can, you know, run around and have a smooth experience, and it literally doesn't take anything away from your experience, but what it gives you in return is like, wow, this feels and looks great because you're running and the screen is just so smooth, and frame rate plays, it really does play a pretty good role in like your overall experience and how the game looks and stuff like that. But there is another dark side to frame generation, and that is ghosting. Like, it does get worse depending on the game that you're playing. Like, if you're playing a game where there's a lot of vegetation, this is where I notice it the most. This is where I notice the most ghosting is in really heavily vegetated areas. When I'm turning the camera and stuff, or when I'm running, I can see that ghosting, you know, coming from my character as each new frame is interpolated. And it doesn't distract me too much, but you can see it. And that might actually, I mean, some games are worse than others, but you'll be able to see that. So out of everything, I think that if you're trying to play on a mouse and keyboard, the frame generation is not going to be the best option for you. Like, it is doable, but you're going to notice, you know, inconsistency a lot more than you will with the controller. So my first recommendation is 100% use a controller if you're using frame generation. 2, ghosting. That is a major problem that both of these developers need to figure out how to solve if frame generation is what they want to use. Now, the average casual gamer is not going to care. They're not going to care. Like, any of this stuff is not going to bother to them. So when they get out there and they're like, yeah, man, I'm going to turn on frame gen and DLSS and FSR and AMD's fluid motion frames and stuff like those particular gamers that just want to play the game and they're not going to care. Like, these features are going to seem mind-blowing to the casual gamer that's just coming from console to PC. That's going to blow their mind. They're going to be like, wow, this is way better. And it's true, because it is way better than any kind of experience you're going to get on a console utilizing frame generation. Like, it is a feature that, like, I'm coming around to a point where it's like, I'm not going to disparage people from using it just because it actually does improve the overall experience. Now, if it was as bad as because there's a lot of people out there that are going to try to make you feel like frame generation is absolute trash. And the way that they use their games in their yes, they're completely right. It is a questionable feature for the developers to try to use. It is a questionable feature for, Nvidia and AMD to try to sell us in lieu of putting out better performance for these GPUs. But where do we go from here, guys? Where do they go from here? And this really does lead in to, like, what the future of gaming is going to actually turn out looking like, my friends. If you think about it this way, if they can generate 3, 4, 5 additional frames and the experience is good and the latency is good, how long is it going to be before Nvidia comes out and he says, look, guys, here's the deal, man. Like, I can sell you this GPU that basically just does all the AI stuff right on it, for $2,000, because that's the best we can get for what you're going to need for these incredible visuals that we've created, versus just give me your $20 a month. You can just stream this stuff right from our server farm because it's much more powerful. We've got much bigger chips in there. We've got like the big banging server class GPUs in here, and they can just produce significantly more and stream it right to you. You don't even need to worry about hardware anymore. You will own nothing and you will be happy. We're getting closer to that, my friends. And with 4x frame generation, or utilizing, with lossless scaling, I'm talking about, I've been talking a lot about FSR3 and AMD's fluid motion frames, but lossless scaling is actually a feature as well. And that can be bought on Steam for like $7, and then you can utilize that on any game to pretty much upscale and frame generate. And in my opinion, I think that the overall AMD FSR3 frame generation feels a little bit more refined for sure. But I feel like lossless scaling and AMD's fluid motion frames 2 are almost like one and the same. Like they're the same thing, in my opinion. It's just easier to set up AMD's fluid motion frames 2 than it is to set up lossless scaling. And like you can say that it's completely different. There are some scenarios that I've been testing with lossless scaling that could theoretically be better in terms of like maybe a little bit of image quality, maybe a little bit of freaking less judder or something like that. But I've found a way on my setup to at least, and I mean, like I said, I'm running a 7900 XTX with a 7800X 3D. I have enough power to push this stuff pretty high frame rate already, and I've found a way to make frame generation feel significantly better on my particular setup. Now, if you're coming to this with a lower end GPU, like, I do not know how that is going to perform for you, my friends. I just do not know, and I don't have all the answers for you because I'm not a tech expert. I'm just a consumer, just like you, remember? And so yeah, guys, I can only give you my opinion on it. I think that if you want to use it, try it. I feel like your results are going to vary significantly from game to game. Racing games, it actually feels fine because like you're always going in like a straight line. So that always felt pretty dang good on a racing game for improved clarity and motion and all of that stuff. Like, yeah, frame generation works just fine for that. Shooters, first-person shooters, definitely a lot harder to want to use frame generation for that type of an experience. But third-person, over-the-shoulder, open-world games, that there is where it starts to become hit or miss. Some games, if you've got a really high frame rate, you can easily use it and it will not bug you. If you are stuck with a lower frame rate, it's going to suffer. It's going to stutter. It's going to feel a little bit janky. But in terms of like corridor games, oh man, that one's a tough one. That one I'm trying to find a reason to like it for real, to be completely honest with you, because it is, if you're in a corridor game, like that means you're moving your camera a lot. That means you've always got walls and stuff right there. So if you've got a low frame rate, it is terrible. It is absolutely freaking terrible. You got a higher frame rate, it definitely gets better, but there's a lot of stuff that you can't utilize this to fix some games. Like you just can't. And then the last part, this is the last thing. Frame generation absolutely can improve like your CPU performance. It allows your GPU to create more frames off of that, so it gives your CPU, if you've got a slower CPU, more time to actually do its job, because instead of the GPU just sitting there being bored, it's working. So the CPU, it actually does help. It is a pretty decent improvement to CPU heavy games when you turn on frame generation. So that's like one case that I would absolutely be like, yeah, if you're having like CPU bottlenecks and stuff, turn on frame generation. Like I said, lock your frame rate to the most stable you can get, turn on frame generation, and boom, you're gonna have a smoother experience, because now your CPU is not being, now your GPU is not being held up by your CPU, your GPU is actually running better, so it is improving the experience. So there's a lot of good to come from frame generation, but I get what the other people are saying. And we'll close this video out with this, is like, I get what you're saying. If you're a hardware enthusiast, and you are being asked to spend significant amounts of money over what you used to spend for GPUs, and a lot of the solution to the giving you a higher frame rate or giving you better image quality is all being done by algorithms and AI, or upscaling or something like that. Like, I can see your frustration and why you are 100% like against these GPUs being like this. But then on the other hand, our games look significantly better than they ever have. They look really good. And, I think that a lot of the frustration really does come from trying to chase 4K. I think that I've said this before, we are at the 1440p, like we're like peak for 1440p right now. I think 1440p is absolutely incredible. I think your entry-level GPUs can do 1440p, all the way up to your high-end stuff being able to do high refresh 1440p. I think we're at a good spot. 1440p wise. I think that in the next 10 years, we hopefully will get to that point where 4K is the next, 1440p, but I think we're going to be here for at least another generation or two before we actually start to see a real difference in how well 4K gaming can be on GPUs, because right now we're like teetering. I mean, like, we can get good 4K experiences utilizing heavy upscaling, but we can get incredible 1440p experiences without having to use upscaling. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, guys. I think the frame generation, I don't necessarily think it's the future. I think the future of gaming is obviously going to be streaming from a server farm. If frame generation is the future, that's only going to be like for maybe a generation or two, right before they, convince us that streaming from a cloud is significantly better, and, they're still going to have us buying some sort of a hardware for, yeah, I don't know, guys. I think the future of gaming is quite weird, but I would like to see, I think we need more of an improvement in how games play over how good they look. The games already look incredible. We just need better games, better performance, more of a reason to spend as much money as we do on on these GPUs, because I don't think there's any game out there that's absolutely worth the cost right now of buying any of this stuff. I just don't think they're like so fleeting nowadays. They just come and go like really quick, and you're just buying these things and yeah. So all right, my friends, if you guys like this content, do not forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.